at the point I'm at in the scene, the file is called mountain_standard_terrain_3D_sculpt. So you can load that in if you want to start at this point. We're going to take a look at some more brushing options and just a few more things we can do for painting the terrain. If we go up to the top, we have the ability to show our clipping planes, which we can move across the surface. We've got our top and our bottom. And the brushes will work to constrain to the clipping range. So if we turn on, say, inflate, constrain it to the clipping range, it will only affect within the defined area of the clip. So then we could move that up a little further, modify a little more of it. Keeping in mind that this also works for materials. So we're going to go down to the bottom, and we're going to add, first we're going to switch to the paint material, and we're going to replace that default rock. Let's use the grass texture. Or actually, we will need to remove the default rock manually. What we'll do is just increase our flow. And it looks like what we need to do is turn off the airbrush mode, because that's just taken too long to fill in. We are seeing, looks like unsmooth edges, looks like pixelation, but the render does not look like that. So we can increase our size and just kind of fill in based on the clipping range. Looks like I'm going to have to go down a little further. Invert. Oh. Undo. Raise the clipping range. In order to erase some of that. And then we'll go ahead and just adjust the clip back so we can see the whole terrain. Another thing you can do is if you want to constrain the texture map or the color down here, you can click this little button on the side that will fit the texture map to the clipping range. It's just temporary though. I don't believe it stays after you close the terrain editor. Yeah, it looks like it resets just about every time. And I'm just going around now and kind of cleaning up the edge with a larger brush. Most of that will smooth out in the render, but just to fine-tune it a little bit. Okay, now we're going to add another surface to this. We're going to add another material. We're going to choose from rocks. And I'm going to pick the red-green patches. And now we're going to move over to the Environment tab, which we haven't really looked at yet. We're going to turn off Constrain to Clipping Range. We don't need to worry about that. And what we can do is now control the brush and its presence based on slope, the orientation, angle of the terrain, the direction, the side of it, and also based on the altitude. So let's just take a look at altitude, and we'll cut it in half, and we get a nice preview of where our brush range is. So now we can see that it's just this top area. We can adjust the fuzziness. I'm going to go ahead and increase the flow. Make sure invert is turned off. And I think I'm going to stick with the airbrush turned off for the painting and go back and use a mask. And we'll go ahead and select maybe one of the square rocks. And I think I'm going to go into actually one of the strata, strata 12. Now for the most part the material really won't show very highly detailed. And it looks like I was modifying the resolution by subdividing, even though it's not affecting the sculpting. That's alright. What I'm going to do is go back to the environment and we can adjust that altitude. Go ahead and leave that off for now, and then we'll take a look at the slope. And I just want to affect the steeper slopes. So we'll adjust that until we get a good area. That should be good. And then if we want to add a bit of a fall off to it, we can just increase the fuzziness. We can also do it on the steep side, so the very, very steep edges will still be kind of smoothed out. And if we also want to sculpt with this at the same time, we can turn on the sculpting. We'll set it to constant. We'll do freeform. Limit our bandwidth to 4. And we can set it to subdivide now that we have our limit bandwidth. Oh, and it looks like we do need to turn the airbrush on. Reduce that flow. I'm going to undo that last. It looks like I already have that area subdivided. And as you can see, there's a very large change between the geometry, because it's taking different sections and squares and subdividing them as the brush gets smaller. And a lot of the extra detail isn't always needed. But in this case, it looks pretty nice. I'll go ahead and rotate the mask a bit. It's given us a pretty neat looking rock outcrops. It might be a bit much. Go ahead and decrease our flow a little. We'll go ahead and rotate the image again. Looks like it might still be a little too much for the flow. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my tablet. Looks like even that was still a bit much. Sometimes you really gotta just kind of wait for it to sculpt it out. We'll go ahead and set a larger size. Oh, that's a bit too much. We'll go over to the environment. Actually, we can turn off the limit bandwidth, and that should allow us to... Oh, it looks like it did subdivide way too much. And brought us up to 6, which it might have did earlier, actually. That's alright. That's not too high of geometry. And so we'll go ahead and adjust that. And we could also invert the mask, invert the brush, and start pushing it in. And go to our environment tab and increase the fuzziness. We can also extend our range a bit. And start pushing in towards the top. And the preview, the environment preview, and actually seeing the brush range is new to Vue 10, which is a really nice feature. And there is another preview option for the materials. That's the little button right next to each material layer. It'll show you the current material texture in a higher resolution. It'll also show you any fractals that happen to be tied in to the material layer. We'll see if we get a chance to take a look at those. I'm going to go back. We can rotate the texture map. And we'll turn off the inversions. Go back and kind of work on some of the other areas, maybe increase the size of the brush. If we do that, we probably will want to turn off the limit bandwidth. Oh, maybe not if it's creating too much detail. Just raise it to a bandwidth of 2. And that way we can affect larger areas. And I do want to smooth out some of these sections over here. So we can switch to the smooth brush and limit the bandwidth to 1. Start with 1. Change our size. And took care of some of it. I'll try 3. And 2. If needed, we can go higher. Up to 4. Looks like some of that stuff might be happening at the bandwidth of 4. Let's go back and set it to 2. And just take care of some of those areas up there. So not only can we, of course, sculpt, then we can paint using those same constraints, because even though it was originally set to be painting, it just didn't really appear strong enough. Go ahead and decrease the color there. So go back and we can turn on the mask, and we're going to paint. I'm going to turn off airbrush, and we do want to turn back on the slope constraint. We'll set this to be much larger. Just kind of fill that in. Unfortunately, it's not really possible to see the full resolution while you're painting. We can get a preview of it, but it won't stay for long. So it does make it hard to judge for fine detail work. But we can always export images or alphas out and import them back in. Just kind of doing a general coloration right now. I'm going to increase the fuzziness and just kind of go over it really lightly. Get more of a blend.